The grand halls of the Sarathian Empire's palace were filled with whispers and murmurs. Delegates from dozens of alien races sat in their golden seats, waiting for the ceremony to continue. The Empire was about to sign a major treaty with the Human Federation, a historic moment that would unite their two civilizations. But then, something unexpected happened. Princess Ziyara, the future ruler of the Sarathian Empire, suddenly stood from her ornate throne, her golden eyes locked onto a man standing among the human delegation. The room fell silent as she pointed at him and spoke in a voice filled with emotion. "This is the man who saved me. I owe him everything." Gasps filled the chamber. The nobles and military leaders of the empire exchanged confused glances. Some scoffed, others looked at the human she had pointed at. He was a tall man, rugged, with dark hair and sharp eyes, an ambassador named Daniel Carter. Daniel, on the other hand, looked completely stunned. He blinked, pointing at himself. "Me?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Ziyara stepped forward, her movements graceful yet filled with urgency. "You saved me once, long ago. Do you not remember?" Daniel felt dozens of eyes turn toward him, but his mind was blank. "Princess, I have no idea what you're talking about." A low murmur ran through the assembly. Some Sarathians frowned. A few whispered to each other, their expressions doubtful. One of the high-ranking Sarathian officials, Lord Karen, stepped forward. "Your Highness, surely you must be mistaken. This human has never been to our empire before." But Ziyara shook her head. "No, I will never forget his face. He was the one who saved me when I was a child, during the war on Tenebris. If not for him, I would not be standing here today." Daniel's heart pounded. Tenebris, he had heard of it, a war-torn planet where battles between human forces and Sarathian rebels had raged for years. But he had never been involved. At least, he didn't remember being there. A Sarathian noble scoffed. "This is impossible. How could a mere human save our princess? And why would he pretend not to remember?" Daniel took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Princess, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I don't recall ever setting foot on Tenebris, let alone saving you." But Ziyara's gaze was unwavering. "Then why do I remember you so clearly?" The tension in the room grew thick. The human delegation shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. Then, an elder Sarathian woman stepped forward. She had deep violet skin and wise, glowing eyes. Memories can be altered, suppressed. Her voice was calm, thoughtful. Perhaps the ambassador's past is not as clear as he believes. The words sent a chill through Daniel. If the princess was right, if he had truly saved her, then why didn't he remember? And if his memories had been erased, who had done it? And why? As the court murmured and debated, one thing became clear. The past was about to be uncovered, and the truth would change everything. Daniel Carter stood frozen in the grand hall, his mind racing. Princess Ziyara's golden eyes were locked onto him, filled with certainty. She truly believed that he had saved her life. But how could that be possible? He had no memory of it. The Sarathian nobles whispered among themselves, casting suspicious glances at Daniel. Some looked at him with doubt, others with quiet curiosity. The atmosphere in the chamber grew tense. One of the Sarathian council members, Lord Karen, stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Your Highness, this is absurd. This human has never been to Tenebris. Perhaps you are mistaken." Ziyara's gaze hardened. "I am not mistaken. I remember the war. I remember the fire, the screams, the terror, and I remember him. His voice, his strength. He carried me to safety." Daniel swallowed. The way she spoke, it felt real. Too real. But why couldn't he remember? Taking a deep breath, he turned to her. "Princess, I don't mean to disrespect you, but I truly don't recall any of this. I was never on Tenebris." Ziyara stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Perhaps you don't remember because someone doesn't want you to." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. What was she suggesting? Before he could respond, the elder Sarathian woman, the one who had spoken earlier, walked toward them. Her violet skin shimmered under the palace lights. "I am Lady Vela, keeper of records," she introduced herself. "If the princess speaks the truth, then there must be evidence." Daniel frowned. What kind of evidence? Vela's glowing eyes studied him. Official records, military reports, perhaps even something buried deep in your own mind. Zara turned to Daniel, determination in her voice. "Come with me. We will search the royal archives. If I am right, then there will be proof that you were there." The human delegation shifted uncomfortably. One of the human officers whispered to Daniel, "Are you sure about this? If she's wrong, this could turn into a political disaster." Daniel exhaled slowly. He didn't know what was happening, but something inside him told him he had to find out. If there was even a small chance that the princess was telling the truth, he needed to know. He nodded. "All right, let's see what we can find." The court erupted into hushed conversations as the princess and the human ambassador left together, disappearing into the palace corridors. But hidden among the noble audience, a shadowy figure watched them leave. His expression was grim, his fingers tightening into a fist. The truth was dangerous, and if Daniel Carter uncovered it, he wouldn't live long enough to remember. The royal archives were located deep beneath the palace, in a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors. Daniel Carter followed Princess Zara and Lady Vela down the winding paths, their footsteps echoing in the silence. For a moment, Daniel wondered what he was even doing here. He was just a human ambassador, sent to negotiate peace, not unravel the mysteries of a forgotten war. And yet, here he was, about to dive into the Empire's most guarded secrets. When they reached the archive doors, Lady Vela placed her hand on a glowing panel. The doors slid open, revealing rows upon rows of shimmering data crystals. The air inside was cool, almost chilling. Zara didn't hesitate. She walked straight to a console and began searching through the records. Her hands moved quickly, as though she had done this 100 times before. Daniel stood back, watching. "You seem pretty sure you'll find something," he said. Zara glanced at him, her golden eyes unwavering. "I remember what happened. If it's recorded, we'll find it." Vela moved beside her, studying the console. The princess is right. Military operations on Tenebris were well documented. If Ambassador Carter was involved, there should be a record. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. And if there isn't? The room fell silent for a moment. Zara straightened, looking at him. "Then I'll accept that I was wrong." Her voice was calm, but her expression told a different story. She wasn't used to being wrong, and Daniel had a sinking feeling that she wasn't this time. Minutes passed as Zara and Vela combed through the data. The glow of the console illuminated their faces, casting long shadows on the walls. Finally, Vela froze. "I found something." Zara leaned closer, reading the lines of text that appeared. Her eyes narrowed. "There. Tenebris. Year 2417. Daniel stepped closer. On the screen was a record of a covert mission, a rescue operation conducted during the height of the war. It described a lone human operative who had defied orders to evacuate civilians, including a Sarathian child. The child's description matched Zara perfectly. Daniel stared at the text, his heart pounding. "This can't be right. I've never." He trailed off. The details were precise. Too precise. The name of the operative was redacted, but everything else pointed directly at him. "You see," Zara said quietly. "You were there. You saved me." But before Daniel could respond, the screen suddenly flickered. A warning message appeared. "Access denied. File located." Vela frowned. "What is this?" The lights in the room dimmed. A low hum filled the air. Zara turned to Daniel, her voice tense. "We're not supposed to see this." Daniel's instincts kicked in. He stepped back, scanning the room. Are we in danger? The doors behind them slammed shut. An automated voice echoed through the chamber. Unauthorized access detected. Security measures engage. Zaira drew closer to Daniel. Now we have our proof, and it looks like someone really doesn't want us to have it. As alarms blared and the archive room darkened, Daniel's heart raced. He looked at the princess, her determined expression not faltering for a moment. Despite the rising tension, she seemed utterly focused. We need to get out of here, he said, glancing around for an escape. The doors had sealed shut. The room, which moments ago had been silent and still, was now filled with flashing lights and a growing hum. Not yet, Zaira replied sharply. We're too close. Vela's voice cut through the noise, calm but firm. I can delay the security lockdown. Give me a moment. She moved to a nearby console, her violet fingers flying over the controls. A few seconds later, the hum subsided slightly, and the flashing lights steadied. Zaira turned back to Daniel. That file proves you were there. Someone erased your memory and tried to hide the records. They didn't want the truth to come out. Daniel rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of it all. But why would anyone go through that trouble? I was just one soldier. Why am I so important? Zaira's golden eyes met his. Because you saved me. And saving me meant defying orders. Orders that were meant to keep the Sarathian Empire's secrets safe. If people find out, it could change everything. Daniel shook his head. I still don't remember any of it. Your memories might not be gone forever. Vela interjected, her voice thoughtful. There's a chance they were suppressed, not erased. With the right technology, you might be able to recover them. Suppressed? Daniel asked, frowning. How does that work? Vela's glowing eyes narrowed. During the Tenebrous conflict, the Sarathian military experimented with neurosuppressants to protect sensitive information. It's possible that, after the mission, they used those on you, to ensure that what you knew never left the battlefield. Great, Daniel muttered. So, I'm just a pawn in some cover-up. Not anymore, Zaira said firmly. You're the key to exposing it. Suddenly, the doors behind them hissed open. Daniel tensed, expecting soldiers or automated defenses, but instead, 2 Sarathian guards stood at attention. They saluted the princess and stepped aside. Your Highness, one of them said, his voice urgent. We have orders to bring you and the ambassador to a secure location. Zaira's eyes narrowed. Whose orders? The guard hesitated. The High Council's. Vela glanced at Daniel, her expression wary. This could be a trap. Zaira considered for a moment, then stepped forward. Lead the way. Daniel followed closely, his mind spinning with questions. What would they find next? And if his memories really could be restored, what would he learn about the man he used to be? As they moved deeper into the palace, one thing was clear. The past wasn't going to stay buried. And whatever was coming next would be even more dangerous. Daniel Carter walked beside Princess Zaira, his thoughts spinning in circles. The guards led them down long, dim corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The princess moved with calm determination, but Daniel couldn't help feeling like a mouse being lured into a trap. Why would someone suppress my memories? Daniel asked quietly. He was careful not to speak too loudly in case the guards overheard. Why not just eliminate me if I was such a problem? Zaira turned her head slightly, her golden eyes flickering in the dim light. Killing you would have raised questions, even back then. If word got out that a human had saved a Sarathian royal, especially me, some people might have seen it as a sign of weakness. It was easier to make you forget and hide the records. Her calm explanation did little to ease Daniel's discomfort. He knew the Sarathian Empire was powerful, but the idea that they had the ability to alter memories on a whim was chilling. What else had they done to him without his knowledge? Ahead, the corridor opened into a large chamber. It was stark and sterile, with walls lined with monitors displaying complex data streams. At the center stood a tall figure, his dark robes flowing like liquid shadow. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his voice carried the weight of authority. "Princess Ziera," the figure greeted, "and Ambassador Carter. I was informed of your discovery in the archives." Daniel exchanged a wary glance with Ziera. "Who are you?" The man lowered his hood, revealing sharp features and deep blue eyes that seemed to pierce through Daniel. "I am Commander Thalos. I oversee the Empire's security operations, and I must admit, I find this situation intriguing." "Why would you lock the archives if we had permission to view them?" Ziera demanded, her voice sharp. "You knew I was looking for the truth." Thalos offered a thin smile. "There are truths, Princess, that can destabilize an empire. The records you unearthed are highly sensitive. Their release could cause chaos." "And my memories?" Daniel asked, his voice rising. "Why were they taken?" Thalos studied him for a long moment. "Your actions during the Tenebris conflict were complicated. You disobeyed direct orders to save civilians. That disobedience could have tarnished the Empire's image, especially if it became known that the Sarathian heir owed her life to a human who went against command. So they erased my memories to protect their reputation," Daniel said bitterly. "Correct," Thalos said, "but now you remember enough to be a threat. The question is, what do you plan to do with that knowledge?" Ziera stepped forward, her voice firm. "We plan to bring the truth to light. The people deserve to know what really happened." Thalos tilted his head. "Do you realize the cost of that decision, Princess? Exposing this secret could weaken the Empire, create unrest, and put you at risk." "The price of truth is always high," she replied. Daniel looked at her, seeing not just a royal figure, but a person willing to fight for what was right, even at great personal risk. He straightened his shoulders and nodded. "If it means getting my memories back, I'll take that risk." Thalos sighed, as if he had expected their answer. "Then I suggest you both prepare yourselves. Once you uncover the full truth, there will be no going back." As they left the chamber, Ziera and Daniel walked side by side, the silence between them filled with unspoken tension. The guards escorting them back through the dim corridors kept glancing over their shoulders, as if they expected someone to ambush them at any moment. Daniel's mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of his stolen past. "Do you trust him?" Daniel finally asked, breaking the quiet. "Thalos." Ziera shook her head. "Not even slightly. He's been a shadow behind the throne for years. My father trusts him because he's effective, but that doesn't mean he's loyal to the truth." Daniel nodded. It confirmed what he'd suspected. Commander Thalos might have revealed part of the story, but he was still hiding something, maybe the most important pieces. They reached a smaller, less ornate room deep within the palace. Ziera gestured for the guards to remain outside and then sealed the door behind them. The space was dimly lit, with a single holographic console at its center. "I couldn't say this earlier," Ziera began, lowering her voice, "but someone in the High Council has been blocking my efforts to look into the Tenebris records. Every time I've requested information, it's been denied, redacted, or—" She glanced at him. "Deleted." Daniel frowned. "Someone powerful, then. Powerful enough to erase both the records and my memories." "Exactly. That's why we need to move carefully. If Thalos is involved, he's not working alone. There's a faction within the Empire that will do anything to keep this buried." Daniel leaned on the console, his expression hard. "So what's the next step? I need to know everything. What I did, why I did it, and why I can't remember any of it. If we can find my real memories, maybe we'll have the leverage we need." Ziera activated the console. A faint blue light filled the room as she accessed files from a secure partition. The interface displayed encrypted data and military reports from the Tenebris conflict. "I managed to salvage some fragments before the system locked us out," she explained. "These files mention a covert medical lab on Tenebris. If my theory is right, That's where they perform the memory suppression on you. The facility is supposed to be long abandoned, but we might find something there." Daniel's heart sank. "You're saying we have to go back to that war zone?" "It's not a war zone anymore," Zahra replied. "It's a deserted world. But it's still dangerous. If anyone suspects we're heading there, we could be stopped before we even reach the surface." A shadow crossed her face, or worse, killed. Daniel felt a wave of unease. He was starting to realize that this wasn't just about uncovering the truth. This was a fight against powerful forces willing to eliminate anyone who got too close. He clenched his fists. "Then we move quickly and quietly," he said. "If there's even a chance my real memories are still out there, I have to take it." Zahra nodded. "We'll leave at first light, and we'll have to trust no one, not even our own people." For the first time, Daniel saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. The stakes weren't just high for him. They were high for her, for the Empire, and for anyone who believed that the truth was worth risking everything. The shuttle descended through the dense atmosphere of Tenebris, its hull rattling as it pushed against the planet's harsh winds. From the cockpit, Daniel watched the desolate surface come into view, a barren landscape of gray rock and jagged peaks. It looked nothing like the battlefield he had imagined. Instead, it was eerily quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. Zahra sat beside him, her expression grim. The princess, usually so composed, now carried a quiet intensity. She glanced over at Daniel. "When we land, we move quickly. This is still Sarathian territory. If anyone followed us, we'll be vulnerable until we're inside the facility." "Understood," Daniel replied. He adjusted the harness of his gear, though it felt strange on him. Once, he had been a soldier, at least according to the files they'd uncovered. But now, with his memories missing, he felt more like an imposter wearing someone else's uniform. The shuttle landed in a small clearing surrounded by jagged rocks. The door hissed open, and Daniel stepped out onto the rough terrain. The air was dry and thin, carrying a metallic taste. Zahra followed, and they both took a moment to scan their surroundings. "Over there," Zahra said, pointing to a jagged cliff. A faint glimmer of light reflected off the rocks, hinting at something unnatural. As they approached, a metallic structure came into view, partially buried in the rock. The facility was old, its once smooth walls now pitted and weathered. A large set of blast doors, scared by time, stood closed, but Zahra moved toward a control panel embedded in the rock face. "Give me a moment," she said, brushing dust from the panel. Her fingers moved over the alien controls with precision. The console flickered, then hummed to life. Daniel stood watch, scanning the horizon. The silence of the planet unnerved him. He expected to feel something. Recognition, a memory triggered by the sight of this place. But all he felt was an aching void where his past should have been. "Got it," Zahra said as the doors groaned and slowly slid open. A cold, musty air wafted out, carrying the scent of decay. The interior was dark, but faint emergency lights flickered along the walls. Zahra took a step inside, her hand resting on the hilt of the blade at her side. Daniel followed, his boots echoing in the empty corridor. "This is where it happened," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "This is where they erased your memories." Daniel stopped and looked around. The walls were lined with dormant machinery, strange devices whose purposes he couldn't begin to guess. They felt wrong somehow, as if the very air carried the weight of what had been done here. As they moved deeper into the facility, the quiet was broken by a low hum. The sound grew louder, pulsing steadily. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to the weapon strapped to his leg. "Someone's activated the main systems," Zahra whispered. Her voice held a mix of caution and urgency. "We're not alone." Daniel's pulse quickened. Whoever was here didn't want them finding the truth, and if they were willing to risk exposing themselves, it meant what lay ahead was more dangerous, and more important, than they'd ever imagined. The hum of machinery echoed through the desolate halls of the facility. Daniel and Zierra moved cautiously, their footsteps light on the metal floor. The faint emergency lighting cast long shadows that flickered with each step. Daniel's pulse quickened as they approached a sealed chamber at the end of the corridor. "This is it," Zierra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where they stored the memory suppressor logs." Daniel's stomach churned. He felt a strange pull toward the room, as if something long buried was clawing its way back into his mind. He didn't remember what had happened here, but his body seemed to recognize it. Zierra crouched by a control panel beside the door. Her fingers moved with precision, inputting an override code. The lock disengaged with a heavy thud. The door creaked open, revealing a chamber filled with towering servers and glowing consoles. As they stepped inside, the hum of the machinery grew louder. Data streams flickered on holographic displays, showing fragments of old missions and classified experiments. "This is it," Zierra said, her golden eyes scanning the information. "The records are still here." She motioned for Daniel to stand by one of the consoles. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the controls. The idea of recovering his memories was both thrilling and terrifying. What if the truth changed how he saw himself? What if it made everything worse? "Do it," Zierra said softly. "You deserve to know." Daniel's fingers hovered over the keys, then pressed down. The screen flared to life, displaying a series of encrypted files. Zierra worked quickly, bypassing the security layers. Then the screen froze. A single file blinked on the display. "Memory Suppression Protocol. Subject #912. "That's you," Zierra said, her voice tense. Daniel took a deep breath and opened the file. At first, the text was a jumble of technical jargon. But then, as Zierra decrypted it further, fragments of video and audio logs appeared. The screen displayed a grainy recording. A younger Daniel stood in a dimly lit room, his uniform torn and bloodied. A Sarathian officer spoke off-camera. "You saved the princess, disobeyed a direct order, and jeopardized our mission. You forced our hand, human. Your memory will be suppressed, and you'll be reassigned. This never happened." The Daniel in the recording didn't argue. He looked defiant, but silent, as if he knew he had no choice. Moments later, the recording ended, and the screen filled with static. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the screen. "It's true," he whispered. "I really did save you." Zierra placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now you know why they took your memories. You defied them to do what was right. That's who you are, Daniel." But before he could process her words, the hum of the facility changed. Red lights began to flash, and a robotic voice announced, "Security breach detected. Defense protocols initiated." Zierra drew her blade. "We need to leave. Now." Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon, his newfound knowledge fueling his resolve. Whatever danger lay ahead, he was ready to face it, because now he remembered who he truly was. The facility's red lights cast a pulsing glow, turning the metallic walls into streaks of crimson and shadow. Daniel and Zierra ran through the labyrinth of corridors, their boots echoing with every step. The robotic voice droned overhead. "Unauthorized access. Security measures engage." Daniel's heart pounded as they rounded a corner. "What now? How do we get out of here?" Zierra didn't slow down. "The way we came in is sealed, but there's a service tunnel near the main lab. It should lead us outside." "Should?" he asked, his tone edging on disbelief. "It's our best chance," she replied, glancing back at him. "Unless you'd rather face the defense drones." He didn't answer. The sound of approaching footsteps, heavy and mechanical, grew louder behind them. Daniel gripped his weapon tightly, readying himself. He hadn't fired a shot in years, but his muscles remembered the training, even if his mind didn't. The first drone appeared from a side passage, its spherical body gleaming under the red light. A sharp beam of energy shot out, narrowly missing them. Zierra slid behind cover and returned fire with her plasma blade, the bright arc slicing the air. Daniel dove to the side and fired a burst from his pulse rifle. The shot hit the drone's sensor array, sending it crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. "Nice shot," Zara called out, her blade cutting through another drone that flew toward them. But her voice was strained. The drones were small, fast, and there were too many of them. If they didn't reach the tunnel soon, they'd be overwhelmed. They ran again, ducking under pipes and around bulky equipment, until they reached a heavy door. Zara activated the control panel, but nothing happened. The console flashed an error message in Sarathian script. She swore under her breath. "Problem?" Daniel asked, glancing nervously behind them as more drones buzzed into view. "The panel's fried," Zara said, slamming her hand against it in frustration. "I'll have to force it open." Daniel stepped forward, raising his rifle. "I'll cover you. Just hurry." Zara drew a small plasma torch from her belt and began cutting through the door's locking mechanism. Behind them, the hum of drones grew louder. Daniel fired another shot, taking down one, then two more, but the swarm kept coming. For every drone he destroyed, another seemed to replace it. "Hurry," he yelled. "I'm almost there." Zara snapped back. A high-pitched whine filled the air. One of the drones powered up a larger energy cannon, its glow building into a searing white. Daniel spotted it and fired, but his shot only grazed its armored shell. The cannon fired, and he barely dove out of the way as the energy bolt slammed into the wall behind him. "Done," Zara shouted as the door creaked open just enough to slip through. "Let's go." Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He darted through the gap, Zara right behind him. The door slammed shut, and the drone's angry hum faded as they left the facility's main hallways behind. They found themselves in a narrow, dimly lit service tunnel. Zara took a deep breath, her hands resting on her knees for a moment. "We'll follow this to the surface," she said. "Once we're out, we'll have to find a secure place to regroup." Daniel nodded, his rifle still in hand. "And then what? The council will never let this go." Zara straightened, her golden eyes burning with defiance. "Then we fight," she said firmly. "No more running. No more hiding the truth. I'll bring this to the High Council myself. They'll have no choice but to face what they've done." Daniel felt a flicker of doubt, but also admiration. For all her rank and privilege, Zara wasn't afraid to stand up to her own people. He just hoped that when the time came, her courage and their fragile alliance would be enough. Daniel and Zara emerged from the tunnel into the bright light of the tenebrous sky. For the first time, Daniel noticed how the landscape stretched out endlessly, a barren expanse of gray and pale blue. The wind was harsh, carrying a biting chill, but it wasn't the cold that made him shiver. They were exposed now. No more walls or corridors to hide them. He scanned the horizon, half expecting drones to rise from the rocks, or a Sarathian strike team to appear at any moment. "We have to get to the extraction point quickly," Zara said, her voice steady despite the tension. "If the council is tracking us, they won't give up easily." Daniel nodded. He had always been a soldier at heart, even without the memories. Something about the way his pulse quickened, the way his focus sharpened, he felt ready. They made their way across the rocky terrain, each step carefully measured. Daniel kept his weapon ready, his eyes scanning the horizon. Zara walked just ahead, her blade drawn and glowing faintly. Finally, they reached the clearing where a transport shuttle waited. It was a small, rugged vessel, its hull dented from years of use. The pilot inside gave a quick wave, urging them to hurry. As they boarded, Daniel took one last look at the landscape. Tenebrous, the place where he had lost his memories, and where he had begun to recover them. He felt a strange mix of anger and resolve. The people who had done this to him, who had hidden the truth for so long, couldn't silence him anymore. The shuttle's engines roared to life. As they lifted off, Zara turned to him. "When we return to the capital, The council will try to discredit us. They'll call us traitors, conspirators, anything to keep the truth buried. Daniel met her gaze. What's the plan then? How do we make them listen? Zara's golden eyes burned with determination. We don't give them a choice. We release the records. We tell our story to anyone who will listen. The people of the Empire deserve to know that their leaders used lies and suppression to cover up their own mistakes. And if they still don't believe us? He asked. Zara hesitated, then shook her head. Some won't, but enough of them will. We just need enough. Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't fully trust the Sarathian political system, but he trusted Zara's resolve. She had risked everything for the truth, and now he had to do the same. When the shuttle landed back in the capital, the atmosphere was tense. Officials surrounded them the moment they stepped off, their expressions a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and fear. Daniel and Zara held their ground. They had the evidence, and more importantly, they had the will to fight. I know who I am now, Daniel thought as he faced the gathered crowd. I remember what I stand for. And as the people watched, the man who had once been erased from the Empire's history stepped forward, ready to reclaim his place, not just as a forgotten hero, but as a force for change.